Chapter 206. You've been hiding in the capital for 10 to 20 years, so you should have understood the various powers, but you don't know anything about this prince. This isn't the first time something has happened to Ruan Fangfei. You should know that as Ruan Fangfei's biggest backer, how could this prince let you go? You didn't have enough preparation, but you said that this prince made a sudden move. Is this your ability? Madame Wei's face turned green and white for a moment, but she quickly smiled again. It's all because this subject's skills are inferior. Now that I've fallen into the prince's hands, I'll naturally be at his disposal. As she spoke, she winked at Li Hongyuan. Ruan Ruiz Hong was so angry that his veins were popping. No matter what, she was still his wife, but she was actually seducing another man in front of him. However, after hearing their conversation, he knew that this cheap woman had another identity, so he could only suppress his anger. Madame Wei continued. Can this subject ask 2 questions, Prince? When did Prince notice this subject's wife? Why did you notice this subject's wife? It's reasonable to say that as a woman of the inner residence, you shouldn't be treated differently by Prince. You raised such a good daughter. Is it strange that this prince noticed you? His eyes still didn't have the slightest emotion. Belittling someone might hurt, but to have nothing and be completely disregarded was even more uncomfortable for some people. The more arrogant an arrogant one was, the easier it was to become this kind of person. Madame Wei happened to be this kind of person, but she restrained herself very well so outsiders couldn't see it. Madame Wei's lips moved. Indeed, her daughter had targeted this person from the beginning. Because of this person, she would implicate herself. What a simple connection. At that time, she still doted on Ruan Fangfei. Since her daughter had taken a fancy to him, then no matter who the other party was, it was the other party's honor. She had never given up on investigating the princes, especially after he was bestowed the title of prince. However, Li Hongyuan hid too deeply and was too cautious in doing things. He didn't reveal any clues, so naturally, she didn't have the chance to find any clues. 1 year, 2 years, 4 years later, the results of the investigation on Li Hongyuan remained the same. After all, she had limited energy and manpower, so she withdrew her investigation on Li Hongyuan and allowed her daughter to get close to him. You've been investigating this prince for 4 years. If it wasn't for Ruan Fangfei, you probably would have been able to find some clues. Before the age of 16, Li Hongyuan had been in the palace. At that time, Madame Wei had already taken root in the palace. Even if she had memories of her previous life, she had too little to do with Madame Wei. For no reason, Li Hongyuan would not easily suspect her. If they knew that Li Hongyuan was not a good-for-nothing, but a man-eating ferocious beast that was hibernating in the dark, not to mention letting Ruan Fangfei get close, they would definitely make her stay far away. After all, any young lady did not need a reason to stay away from the King of Hell. Then again, Ruan Fangfei had fallen in love with Li Hongyuan when she was young. She allowed her to get close to him as a means to test him. If she really had that ambition, how could she not be tempted in the face of the power of the cabinet chief? Therefore, this was actually an unsolvable situation. The Wei clan had lost miserably because of a single move. Prince is wise and mighty. This subject is ashamed of her inferiority. Speaking of which, to deal with a person like this subject, the sooner you make your move, the better. However, Prince has delayed for a few years. Why is that? It was really tiring to deal with people who did not act according to common sense. Because your daughter is very useful and your threat is within a controllable range. This prince does not mind keeping valuable things. Would Li Hongyuan tell her? Naturally not. Other people were not qualified to know about Jingwan's matters. Speaking of which, Ruan Fangfei had told her about Jingwan's matters, but she did not believe it at all and had long thrown it to the back of her mind. Now, she did not connect it at all, other than accidentally. Who would think of this kind of truth? Even if Ruan Fangfei had guessed it, and Li Hongyuan had personally admitted it, would she really believe it? Most likely, she would think that Li Hongyuan was deliberately angering her. Rational people would pay attention to evidence and reason. Luo Peishan and old Madame Luo easily believed Li Hongyuan's words because they were emotional and thought that Jingwan could be fancied by anyone. Seeing that Li Hongyuan did not continue to speak, the Wei clan maintained her seductive attitude. Then now, how does Prince plan to deal with this subject? This subject has heard that there is a mother and daughter in Prince's courtyard in the capital. Although she was defeated, she still admires Prince. I don't know if she would have the honor to serve Prince. She will definitely let Prince experience what is called happiness in the world. Her body seemed to be slightly rubbing and twisting slightly. She even stuck out her tongue and licked her red lips. It was extremely seductive. Wei clan had learned the art of seduction. Of course, it was just some small movements of her body and some external small things, such as aphrodisiac and the like, that made people feel that she was more attractive than ordinary people. In addition, she had learned the art of sleeping. Generally, the men who touched her always felt that they could be happier with her than with other women. Therefore, without a bit of willpower, it was really difficult to get rid of her. Ruan Ruizhong's sons fell for her probably because of this reason. Coupled with the taboo against morality, it made them, who had released their hearts, even more unable to give up. Wei clan was a person with a strong desire. She had never wronged herself. When Ruan Ruizhong couldn't satisfy her, it was natural for her to have an affair. The reason why she didn't use similar methods on Ruan Ruizhong was that she was worried that he was a little old. If she used too much of his body, he would die young. Then, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. After all, Ruan Ruizhong had a promising future. When she first married him, he had the possibility of becoming the cabinet chief. Such a person could be squeezed out a lot of useful things. However, this man was very conceited. She could achieve her goal without using seduction to keep him. Therefore, in front of him, she was happy to be a good wife and mother. She was now seducing Li Hongyuan. She was confident that as long as she pulled Li Hongyuan to bed, not only could she save her life, but she could also get something that she didn't even dare to think about before. At Ruan Ruizhong's age, he basically didn't have any desire, so Wei clan seduction wouldn't work on him. However, they were still husband and wife in name. She dared to be so brazen and not put him in her eyes. Finally, he couldn't bear it anymore and slammed the table. "Slut, you have big guts." At this time, she still called herself this official's wife. Was she trying to make him feel disgusted? "Your Highness, you also saw it. This woman is so wanton and dirty. If your Highness touches her, wouldn't you dirty yourself? This official will have someone drown her right now to prevent her from harming others." Wei clan didn't take Ruan Ruizhong seriously at all. Her attention was always on Li Hongyuan. Step by step, she approached. The closer she got, the more excited she became. Such a handsome, strong, and capable man aroused her unprecedented desire to conquer. It was a drug that only worked on men, but it seemed to have affected her. At this moment, Madame Wei really looked like a bitch in heat. Luo Peishan was so angry that he almost vomited blood. No matter what, he couldn't let this lewd woman enter Jin Qinhuang's eyes. Otherwise, according to Jin Qinhuang's usual style, he wouldn't be able to clean up this woman who brought him extraordinary shame and humiliation. If he had known earlier, he would have killed her from the start. He hurriedly stepped forward and tried to pull away the woman's carriage that was already close to Jin Qinhuang. Faster than words could tell, Li Hongyuan, who was sitting still, suddenly kicked. First, it was her calf. Taking advantage of her body, falling forward uncontrollably, he kicked straight for her heart without mercy. Wei clan, whose hand had already reached out to her, flew backwards and fell to the ground. Wei clan spat out a mouthful of blood. She felt that her lungs seemed to have shifted. Wei clan's martial arts weren't weak, but in the end, she was restricted by her identity. She couldn't brazenly practice martial arts. In this matter, if she didn't advance, she would fall back. Because compared to Li Hongyuan, she was still lacking a lot. It was difficult to avoid. Ruan Ruizhong was stunned on the spot. Things happened in a flash. He didn't seem to have reacted to what had happened, and the scene had already become like this. He looked at the woman who was vomiting blood on the ground, and then looked at Li Hongyuan, who didn't seem to have done anything. Suddenly, he flung his sleeves and sat back down. When he cared about you, he would hold you like a pearl or a treasure. When he hated you, the more miserable you were, the more delightful it was to watch. When Ruan Ruizong married her, he was already over 50 years old. He had already passed the age of admiring someone. Therefore, Ruan Ruizong cared more about other things than love. As a result, it was very easy to harden his heart. Wei Clan's chest was burning with pain, but she stubbornly looked at Li Hongyuan. Just now, he kept looking at her. She thought that he was just like other men. As long as she used a little trick, she could easily make him fall in love with her. But now, after looking carefully, she found that his gaze was frighteningly clear. There wasn't the slightest bit of desire. It could be seen that the medicine she prepared didn't work. He looked at her like he was looking at a clown. Her actions, in his eyes, were like listening to a funny joke. Wei Clan's gaze lowered. She couldn't help but cough twice, which made her heart feel even more uncomfortable. When she raised her head again, her gaze was even more heated. It was a naked desire to conquer, as expected of the man who secretly controls the universe. How can I use ordinary methods to deal with you? That's simply an insult to you. Ruan Fangfei is indeed your child. You seduced another man in front of your husband. Ruan Fangfei, as an unmarried woman, dared to undress and recommend herself to a man. It's simply the brothel's loss that she didn't live in it. Before she was disfigured, this prince didn't even look at her. Someone like you, Wei Clan's madam, didn't care at all as she wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. In terms of serving men, even if there were 10 of them, they still wouldn't be able to compare to this subject's hands and mouth, let alone other things. However, Fang Fei admires you. Those in the know all thought that Fang Fei was blind, but it turns out that her taste is very good. Whether it was derogatory or complimentary, Li Hongyuan's emotions didn't fluctuate at all. Li Hongyuan turned to look at Ruan Ruizong and said with interest, "Did the Grand Secretary suffer 8 lifetimes of bad luck to meet this mother and daughter pair? Being played in circles and deceived so miserably, what thoughts do you have?" This prince originally thought that when you learned the truth, you would probably die. Looking at your current situation, it seems that your endurance isn't bad. Ruan Ruizong's face was ashen. Even if he knew that Li Hongyuan wasn't good for nothing, he still couldn't change his opinion of him. He was too sinister, always rubbing salt on other people's wounds, but he couldn't do anything to him. How exactly does Wang you want to deal with this woman? And who exactly is she? A woman who shares a bed with you. You're asking this prince who she is? Ruan Ruizong felt like a fishbone was stuck in his throat. After a while, he struggled to open his mouth. This subject is ignorant. Wang Yi, please do not be stingy with your guidance. For Ruan Ruizong to admit that he was ignorant, it still required a bit of courage. At the very least, it wasn't easy to cross that hurdle in his heart. But thinking about his current situation, it seemed that there was nothing he couldn't admit. Since the Grand Secretary is so sincere, this prince naturally won't be stingy. Bring it in. And he came in from outside and handed a flat box with a lock to Ruan Ruizong. Right now, Ruan Ruizong didn't have much leeway to think. Regardless of whether the things inside were something he could see or not, Wei Shi was now a thorn in his flesh. If he didn't get rid of it, he wouldn't be happy. If Jinxin Wang didn't personally tell him, even if he saw these things, it was possible for Jinxin Wang to hold them tightly in the palm of his hand. He wouldn't turn back. The key was on top. Ruan Ruizong took some time to open it because his hands were trembling. Not only was there a physical problem, there was also a psychological factor. Even if he didn't turn back, he was worried that he would be consigned to eternal damnation. Ruan Ruizong took out the things inside. It was a stack of letters. Ruan Ruizong started to read from the first one. There were more and less contents. Ruan Ruizong read faster and faster, and his hands trembled faster and faster. After reading less than half, he couldn't read anymore. His hands loosened and the things scattered on the ground. The family is unfortunate. The family is unfortunate. Ruan Ruizong's expression was dejected, and then tears flowed down his old face. And Wei Shi, who was lying on the ground and couldn't get up, naturally saw part of the contents of the letters. Her pupils shrunk, and she couldn't help but clench her fists. Because the letters were all the same, she was able to determine at first glance that these were all copies and not originals. But her basis was only the letters. It could be seen that whether it was the handwriting or the special symbols and seals, they were all exactly the same. But just this alone was enough to make her heart jump. She knew that Jin Wang held a lot of her things, but in her view, there shouldn't be anything wrong with the information that she sent out. Now, it seemed that what was called nothing wrong, it was obviously something that was extremely wrong. She sent it out, but it was all under the eyes of others. The reason why there was no mistake was because the other party didn't stop her. Crawling forward on her stomach, she pulled open the letter, mainly looking at the date on it. The earliest was more than 4 years ago. It was about the time when Wan Fengfei dealt with Li Hongyuan's fiancée. Wang Ye's method is good. You sent out the information through different channels. At the beginning, it wasn't all intercepted. This situation lasted for about 3 months. With regard to Wei Shi's praise, Li Hongyuan seemed to be a little dissatisfied with his own results. Wei Shi coughed twice. No matter what kind of Jin Wang was, this infuriating nature still didn't change. The Ruan family wasn't an aristocratic family. In terms of background, perhaps it couldn't be compared to the Luo family. But they had served the country since the founding of Qi Yuan. When it came to Ruan Ruizhong, it could be said that they had reached their peak. The Ruan family was loyal to the emperor and loved the country. Ruan Ruizhong took the country as his own responsibility. Who knew how many times the people who slept with him had made him wear a green hat? His daughter wasn't his own. These matters, in the present, were already insignificant. He slid down to kneel on the ground. Wang Ye, this official is guilty. This official is guilty and deserves 10,000 deaths. You want to ask for forgiveness, but the target shouldn't be Ben Wang. Ruan Ruizhong's body stiffened slightly. This official is willing to serve Wang Ye like a dog and horse, asking Wang Ye to give me a way out. More than half of the information on those letters had passed through his hands. Although they had been stolen by Wei Shi was his legal wife. They had shared the same bed for 2 years. If he said that he knew nothing about her actions, not to mention outsiders, he would not believe it. In other people's shoes, he would not believe it either. Once this matter was exposed, he wouldn't be able to escape the crime of treason with the enemy. That was a great crime that involved the confiscation of his property and the extermination of his family. Therefore, his personal honor and disgrace were really not worth mentioning. After the heaviest blow, Ruan Ruizhong became abnormally clear-headed. His muddled brain started to work again. The current situation absolutely didn't allow him to be unable to recover. If he didn't think of a way to reverse the situation, he would be the biggest sinner of the Ruan family. In the future, when he went underground, what would he use to face his ancestors? No matter how stupid he was, he should know the true face of this Jin Wang. He had long known about the matter, but concealed it. He knew the whole story from beginning to end. Then, everything still had room to maneuver. From beginning to end, he was neutral and unwilling to take sides because he didn't really think highly of that prince. Now, he only knew the tip of the iceberg of Jin Wang's unknown side, but it let him see the potential of ascending to the throne. In addition, he had grasped his own fatal weakness. The right time, the right place, and the right people were all present. Then, there was nothing to assist him. Ruan Ruizhong, Ben Wang acknowledges your ability. But someone like you who is about to lie in the coffin, who knows when you will really lie in the coffin? Is it worth the lives of the entire Ruan family? There are so many capable people with lofty ideals in the world. Ruan Ruizhong was silent. He knew that what Li Hongyuan said was true. Not to mention others, even among the officials in the court, there were many who secretly pledged their allegiance to him and worked for him. Other people aside, his recent arch-enemy, Luo Peishan, was certainly already helping him. Jin Wang was his future grandson-in-law. Helping him was a matter of course. The lives of this official's entire family, in Wang Ye's eyes, are like ants. But to this official, it is as important as 10,000 caddies, even more important than life. Wang Ye is currently in a period of dormancy. Rather than borrowing other people's hands to report this matter to His Majesty, it is better to be magnanimous and let off a group of ants. This official will not hesitate to die 10,000 times for Wang Ye. Although Wang Ye can find countless people to work for him, once the position of the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet is vacant, there will be a scramble from all sides. Even if the person who finally sits in this position is Wang Ye's loyal follower. Not to mention that there will be a lot of incidents in the process. To adapt to this position and handle things with ease, there will also be a process. In addition, the other three people in the cabinet all have their own standpoints. Wanting to sit in this position is not easy. It is better to do it like it is now. For Wang Ye, there is no loss, and it also reduces unnecessary trouble and possible unforeseen events. It is said that the Grand Secretary is a capable person. It can be seen that not only is he good at handling political affairs, his skill in flattery is also not bad. Although from the beginning, he intended to keep Ruan Ruiz Hong. No matter what, the other party had to rush to beg for it, and not him revealing his trump card and letting Ruan Ruiz Hong take the initiative. Moreover, in the current Ruan family, the bad reputation brought by Ruan Fangfei, it was not impossible to wash it clean. In the previous life, everything was exposed. Li Hongyuan now saved his old face and also saved the lives of the entire family. Look, he was so benevolent. Your Highness praises me too much, Ruan Ruizong said without changing his expression. Therefore, as a qualified scholar official, what he cared about the most would always be the family. When everything else did not go against this principle, he could pamper, love, and hold it. But once it went against this principle, everything else could be abandoned. Dignity, reputation, life, everything else could also turn a soft bone into a hard bone. Ruan Ruizhong's current state was also within Li Hongyuan's expectations. Because of Ruan Fangfei, because of Madame Wei, the blows to him were small. As long as he did not die, the probability of him standing up in the end was more than 90%. Keeping you can indeed save a lot of trouble. Li Hongyuan was not afraid of trouble, but if he could save it, he would save it. Because that would consume more of his energy, he was more willing to use this energy on Wan. The joy in Ruan Ruizhong's eyes disappeared in a flash. Many thanks, Your Highness. Dare I ask, Your Highness, how should we deal with Madame Wei? This question was purely a matter of business and did not contain any personal feelings, but one could tell from the way he addressed Ruan Ruizhong. Keep her. She knows your body the best. Let her continue to nurse your body. You have to live a few more years so that this prince will not lose money in this deal. If she dies, the people behind her will be alarmed. It is difficult to guarantee that they will not send someone else. Instead of sending someone else, it is better to hold the ready-made one in our hands and let her pass on some things that this prince wants her to pass on. Your Highness is right. Ruan Ruizhong nodded. It seemed that he did not feel uncomfortable keeping such a woman by his side. Another characteristic of scholar officials was that they could bend and stretch to achieve their goals. Under Li Hongyuan's signal, and Jiao came in, pinched Madame Wei's chin, and quickly stuffed a pill into her mouth. Even if he kept her, he had to minimize her threat. From now on, not to mention martial arts, she would become a slender and weak ordinary woman of the inner residence who would pant after walking a few steps. Every day that Ruan Ruizhong dies is a day that you can live. For the sake of her family's life, Madame Wei would do her best to nurse Ruan Ruizhong's body. Take these letters and read them carefully. With Ruan Darren's intelligence, it should not be difficult to find out who is behind her. Ruan Ruizhong, this woman is with you. If anything happens, don't blame this prince for settling old and new debts. Your Highness, please rest assured. It was said that one would learn from one's mistakes. Ruan Ruizhong had suffered such a big loss. If he still could not control Madame Wei, who had lost her wings, he would have lived for decades in vain. After returning to the capital, this prince will arrange a few people for you. That is the most appropriate. Ruan Ruizhong nodded in agreement without saying anything else. This night had also wasted a lot of time. Li Hongyuan prepared to leave. This subject has one more thing to ask Your Highness. This subject asks Your Highness to stay for a while longer. Speak. In recent days, this subject seems to have offended Luo Darren in some way. But this subject is completely unaware. This subject is the head of the cabinet, and Luo Darren is the head of the 6 ministries. If this subject and Luo Darren do not see eye to eye for a long time, I'm afraid that there will be more incidents. Therefore, Li Honyuan raised his hand to interrupt him. On the day of the Dragon Boat Festival, Wan Fangfei secretly drugged Bun Wang's fiancée, causing her to have a slippery pulse for a short period of time. Say, where did your enmity come from? Ruan Ruizhong immediately understood the inner workings of the situation. Don't say that Luo Peishan was only verbally provoking him. If it was someone else, they would have rolled up their sleeves and beaten him up. It's this subject's fault. This subject will definitely find an opportunity to apologize to him. As Ruan Ruizhong spoke, he discovered that Jin Xinwang, who had always been indifferent, actually had a malicious look in his eyes, which coincided with him in the rumors. He was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. That powerless Jin Xinwang, even if he was malicious and ruthless, wouldn't let these old officials care about him. Now that he thought about it, it was really the ignorant who had no fear. He was also glad that Jin Xinwang didn't really want to take someone's life at the slightest disagreement. Otherwise, who knows how many people would die in court without knowing why. Jin Xinwang had that ability. Hearing that Jin Xinwang cared about his current fiancée, he couldn't be blamed for tidying up that vile spawn. He wasn't just deceived by Wei Shi. That vile spawn pretended to be filial and well-behaved in front of him. Wasn't that also deceiving him? Let's not talk about the matter of her shamelessly recommending herself to the pillow. Let's not talk about her repeatedly scheming against Ben Wang's previous fiancés. As for drugging and sending her to a man's bed, that's a small matter. How many people she killed in your Ruan family's backyard, and how she had intimate relations with her cousin in private, it has nothing to do with Ben Wang. Touching Ben Wang's current fiancée, she deserves to die 10,000 deaths. But to let her die like this is rather letting her off too easily. Tomorrow, send her to Zhong Qinwang's hands. In any case, she's not your seed. In the future, just treat it as if this person had never appeared in the Ruan family. Although he already loathed Ruan Fangfei to the extreme, but hearing her conduct and deeds, such a poisonous heart, just like her mother, he still felt like a mouthful of old blood was stuck in his throat. It was unbearable. His illustrious reputation was in vain. How could he be so blind when it came to this pair of mother and daughter? Such a person, it was no wonder that Jin Xinwang was so disgusted. I will follow Wang Ye's instructions. Li Honyuan was unhappy, so naturally, he would make others unhappy as well. He had always understood the essence of it. Now that Ruan Rue Zhong happened to bump into the muzzle of the gun, he could only be unlucky. After sending off Li Honyuan, when Ruan Rue Zhong faced Wei Shi again, he retreated with modesty. With a cold and stern face, he condescendingly looked at Wei Shi, who had become even weaker after taking in Jiu's medicine. It was this woman who made him wear a green hat, seduced his son, and almost harmed the lives of his entire clan. He really hated that he couldn't dismember her body into 10,000 pieces, but Jin Xinwang said that he wanted to keep her. He also felt that killing her wouldn't resolve his hatred. He boasted of being a gentleman and wouldn't be rough with women, but his face had long been trampled into the mud by this woman. Thus, why should he be polite to her? Didn't they say that he was old and couldn't satisfy her? In the future, he would find a way to satisfy her. Naturally, he wouldn't joke around with his own body. However, it would be too easy to find something to replace it. Before Wei Shi was injured, before she took that medicine, she didn't fear Ruan Rue Zhong at all. But now, she knew that she was in a weak position. There was no possibility of resistance. When there was nothing to rely on, she naturally couldn't stop the fear in her heart. She shrunk her body. Lloyd, when he saw her take out her previous gentle and caring appearance, there would be no more tenderness in his heart, only disgust and disgust. He crouched down and grabbed Wei Shi's hair. Don't worry, let's take it slow. Wei Shi was terrified. She had never seen this kind of Ruan Rue Zhong. She couldn't help but think of the person who had trained her. That was a memory that she never wanted to recall. Even after more than 20 years, when she thought of it, she would still tremble. Madame Wei probably didn't know that she was gradually creating an old pervert who was becoming more and more humble on the outside and more tactful when dealing with matters. Of course, it was an honor that she was the only one who could see his inner side. Ruan Rue Zhong wanted to pull her away, but Weisher had only become weaker, not thinner. His current body wasn't very good, so he really didn't have the strength to pull her away. Get lost. He kicked her with his foot. As a prisoner, Weisher was very sensible and moved to the side. Ruan Rue Zhong picked up the letters on the ground one by one. His movements were quite solemn. He made sure that he found every letter. He was even worried that Weisher had secretly hidden them when they weren't paying attention and even took off her clothes. Probably because his mentality was different, Ruan Rue Zhong was especially serious when he looked at these letters. He couldn't help but think. There were some things that he didn't even know about. Then, he found a few unusual contents. They should have been sent to her by the person behind Weisher. With these, he really found some clues. With this kind of method, they intended to take over Qi Yuan's empire. Did they think that there was no one in Qi Yuan? However, Ruan Rue Zhong was also clear that it was impossible to send only one spy. Since Jin Xin Wang could find Weisher, then those who had the slightest connection with Weisher wouldn't be able to escape from his hands. The others might be another Weisher. Qi Yuan had been peaceful in recent years, so Ruan Rue Zhong wasn't too worried. This night, half of it had passed. After that, it was peaceful. The next day, Ruan de Foreign was summoned by her father-in-law. It was said that the old Foreign was sick and asked her to send 2 people to take care of her. The main courtyard couldn't be left unattended, so she also made arrangements. Ruan de Foreign was a little shocked at first. Could it be that her father-in-law was really coaxed by that slut? But she didn't dare to say more. She twisted her handkerchief and respectfully responded. Then, she personally led people to the main courtyard. The originally locked door was already opened, but when Ruan de Foreign saw the dying Weisher on the bed, she was finally relieved. It didn't look like she had coaxed the man back. But why did she still have to be served with good food and drink? But before she could make arrangements here, Ruan Rue Zhong came to find her again. But it wasn't in the front courtyard, but at Ruan Fong Fei's place. Her heart thumped again. She hadn't had time to tell her father-in-law that she had searched Ruan Fong Fei's courtyard. If he saw Ruan Fong Fei's miserable appearance, perhaps his heart would soften when she cried. In that case, the ones who would suffer would be them. She hurried over. Ruan Fong Fei didn't have anyone to clean her up. She still looked the same as yesterday. And since then, she didn't eat anything. Her entire person looked miserable, sobbing softly. Unfortunately, the scar on her face was too ugly and couldn't be covered. Even if she cried like a pear blossom in the rain, there was no beauty. Ruan Fong Fei cried, while secretly glancing at Ruan Rue Zhong. In the end, she saw that he was indifferent. His face was full of indifference. Her heart was completely cold. Who could tell her what was going on? Why did this old thing turn hostile so thoroughly? Madame Ruan let out a sigh of relief. Father, what orders do you have? Ruan Rue Zhong glanced at her. He knew who did this in this courtyard. Don't do it again. Eldest daughter-in-law, remember, there are some things that I don't like people to make decisions on their own. Daughter-in-law will remember. Madame Ruan hurriedly replied. But she should have passed this hurdle. She originally thought that her father-in-law was very kind, but now she felt that he was a bit frightening. Was it because he was hurt too badly? Help her wash up and change her clothes. Then send her to Prince Zhong's courtyard. In the future, she will live as Prince Zhong's person and die as Prince Zhong's soul. She will have nothing to do with the Ruan family. After speaking, he didn't even look at Ruan Fong Fei and left. Ruan Fong Fei forgot to cry. She widened her eyes in disbelief. When she came back to her senses, she immediately chased after him. Father, father, Madame Ruan immediately had people catch her. Her father-in-law even said such words. It could be seen that this lowly child was completely finished. Why aren't you bringing the girl back to wash up? What a scandal to be shouting like this. Father, father, don't go. Why? Why are you doing this to me? I'm your daughter. Didn't you say that I'm the apple of your eye? How can you be so heartless in the blink of an eye? Madame Ruan sneered. Daughter? Apple of his eye? These words, if her father-in-law heard it now, he would feel that it was incomparably thorny. "Shut her mouth for me." Then, Ruan Fong Fei could only make muffled sounds. Madame Ruan patted her face. "Save it. When you reach Prince Zhong's place, you still need a lot of strength to deal with him." Ruan Fong Fei's gaze was as if she wanted to eat her alive. Madame Ruan didn't feel any pain or itch. She moved closer to her. "Do you want to know why your father-in-law did this? Let me tell you. It's because you're not your father-in-law's child. I don't know which man your wall-climbing mother is pregnant with. She's also a bastard child." Ruan Fong Fei's pupil shrank, but she quickly calmed down and stopped struggling. Madame Ruan smiled sarcastically. "You believe it? It seems that you know very well what kind of person your mother is. After all, she was going to give her to Prince Zhong. The clothes given to her were not bad, but it was the last piece of clothing and the last few pieces of jewelry used on her. Madame Ruan wouldn't be reluctant to part with this. It should be known that the dowry originally prepared for her was not much less than that of the only legitimate daughter of Duke Ding. Now it was all saved, perhaps because she knew that she no longer had a foothold in this family. Ruan Fong Fei was quiet. But before getting on the carriage, Ruan Fong Fei suddenly turned back and looked at Madame Ruan with malice. "I'm not that old dog's biological child. Maybe I'm your daughter in name." Madame Ruan was so angry that her whole body trembled. "This damn bastard." Ruan Fong Fei laughed very happily. "You tell that old thing that things won't end like this. The matter of him being a cuckold and his son having an affair with his wife, I will definitely let the world know. Why haven't you blocked her mouth for me?" Even so, Madame Ruan still felt that she couldn't send her away like this. So she ordered people to watch Ruan Fong Fei. She hurriedly went to see Ruan Ruiz Hong. Of course, she didn't dare to say the original words. She just tactfully mentioned it. According to her, he would become mute, unable to speak, unable to write, and unable to speak. No need. The more she did, the more she wanted to cover it up. Since Prince Jean wanted to send her to Prince Zhong, that side should have been taken care of. Prince Jean wanted to use him. Naturally, he wouldn't allow anyone to completely ruin his reputation. Also, if someone really wanted to know something, even if they couldn't speak or write, there were so many people in the world who could read lips. Since he said so, Madame Ruan felt that it was inappropriate and could only do as he said. Ruan Ruiz Hong was also not in a hurry to go to Lu Qingdi's place. The matter of the flood in the south, without him, it would be fine. Thus, it was better to take advantage of this time to take care of his body. The body was his capital. He couldn't wait until he returned to the capital for Lu Qingdi to really fire him. Although Li Hongyuan had a fatal handle on him, Ruan Ruizhong's heart was at ease. At least, he was very clear about what he wanted to do. He didn't need to worry and be distracted by messy things. But there was one more thing. His sons were all brought to the front. He didn't care about his old face now and directly made it clear to them. No matter if they had an affair with that cheap woman or not, they had to cut off all thoughts. This time, he could not pursue it. In the future, they would honestly work and live their lives. They were not allowed to take another concubine. If they violated this, they would first be punished according to the family law and then be directly removed from the clan. No matter who it was, they would not be tolerated. Scram! No matter how old they were, no matter what position they sat in the face of the thunderous rage of their father, they were like quails shrinking their heads. Then they dejectedly scram. Standing outside the door, they looked at each other, and without saying a word, they went their separate ways. Thus, while Ruan Ruiz Hong was peacefully recuperating, Lu Qingdi and the others were busy. Following the reports that were sent one after another, it could be seen that the flood this time was not far from the truth. Moreover, it might be more serious than expected. However, because his heart was still somewhat confident, Lu Qingdi was not in a hurry and methodically issued decrees to the local government. According to Lu Qingdi's words, Luo Peishan had made great contributions this time. In addition to Li Hongyuan's secret help, Luo Peishan had basically understood all the officials in the Qiyuan, not only through the files of the Ministry of Personnel, but also through the secret files that Jin Xin Wang had someone give him. The local officials who could be put in important positions were not 100% accurate, but there was at least 70% to 80% accurate. As long as these people were in position, there would basically be no major mistakes. What made people happy was that there were quite a few of these people in their respective positions. Lu Qingdi felt that he was wise, and when Rui Qin Wang, Gong Qin Wang, and the others found out that there were some of their people, they were secretly happy. Even Ding Guogong wrote a letter to be sent back to the capital to be presented to the Empress. He wanted to see if she could make another move in the capital. Who would have thought that those people were only arranged by Li Honyuan 1 or 2 years ago, or even 3 or 4 years ago? Methodically dealing with these matters, the people who went to the western border also sent back news that the matter was basically investigated. The countermeasures discussed by all parties had basically come to a conclusion. And this year, the 3 people who passed the Jinshu examination, as well as Sun Bingbai, all performed very well. They were all talents with potential. Jiao Wangya humbly bowed in person. These were the blessings of the Qi Yuan. https:///11/4/11/11807/66532239. Chapter 207. How beautiful and festive would it be after it was lit up? The younger children of the Luo family were playing in the courtyard with lanterns in their hands. At this time, no one would talk to them about etiquette. In fact, the children of the Luo family were not so strict. As for the other masters of the Luo family, they were scattered all over the courtyard, leisurely eating snacks and chatting. It was rare for the whole family to be so free. Jingwan leaned her body slightly and rested her elbows on the table to support her cheeks. Her expression was calm and relaxed as her eyes swept over the lanterns in the hands of her younger siblings. Not to mention those extremely beautiful paper bamboo lanterns. There were also very simple grapefruit lanterns, pumpkin lanterns, watermelon lanterns, orange lanterns, apple lanterns, and so on. The grapefruit lanterns were made by hollowing out the grapefruit and removing the inner white layer, leaving only a thin layer. Various vivid and exquisite patterns were carved on the grapefruit and tied with a string and lit with candles. The other lanterns were basically done in the same way. Most of these lanterns were made by ordinary families who did not have the money to buy lanterns for their children. It was unknown when it had become popular among the wealthy families, but the craftsmanship was more exquisite. It was just that the heart was removed and the carvings on the outer shell were still the most common. There were those who were skillful enough to make lanterns that were comparable to lanterns. However, the Luo family's lanterns did not change their original appearance this time. They simply worked on the outer layer. Jingwan had taken a closer look at the lanterns and was impressed by the craftsmen. If it was in her previous life, these craftsmen would be considered master craftsmen. However, in the current world, craftsmen of this level were too common. Every household had their own craftsman. Jingwan saw an oversized wax gourd lantern. It had the most common cylindrical shape, but the head was a little too big. It was more than a meter long and thick. An adult probably wouldn't be able to carry it. Jingwan was a little surprised. Even in her previous life, it was rare to see such a big winter melon, right? Even though the lantern was placed horizontally, the shape of the winter melon did not change at all. It was enough to show that the flesh of the melon was still quite thick. A 10-year-old boy was still struggling to carry it. It attracted not only Jingwan's attention, but the other children also gathered around. Even the adults would say a few words to the wax gourd lamp. Children were very curious about strange things. With this curiosity, they naturally wanted to take it for themselves. The older ones would probably look at it eagerly, but the younger ones did not know how to restrain themselves and directly reached out to snatch it. As a result, it was no surprise that a battle for the winter melon lantern broke out. A group of little kids started to fight, but the older ones knew their limits. In addition, there were servants watching from the side. When they really got angry, they would pull them apart at the first moment. Then, the others would happily watch the show. Jingwan was speechless for a moment. She saw that their respective parents were all in high spirits. Speaking of which, when she was in Qi and Prefecture, such a situation had never occurred. Could it be that this was a more popular way of loving each other? The end result was the death of the winter melon lantern. After it became a lantern, Before it was lit, there was a deafening cry. The juice from the spoiled winter melon made the little kids dirty. In the process of fighting, their hair was messed up and their clothes were scattered. It was a miserable sight. As if they had seen enough, the head of the household, Luo Peishan, waved his hand. Okay, all the children in each branch took them back to wash up and change clothes. Don't think that just because you seem to be calm from the beginning to the end, no one noticed your evil nature. You old bastard. After the initial shock, Sunijia could not help but cover her mouth and laugh. She looked very relaxed and happy. This kind of thing would never happen in Duke Dingwa's prefecture. If it was really a fight between children, the adults behind them could make a scene. The most disgusting thing was not necessarily out of sincere protection of their children. The children's injuries and cries were all bargaining chips. They might even deliberately magnify the bargaining chips. When the little kids returned one by one, they were clean and had innocent smiles on their faces again. The servants had already brought all kinds of food and wine to them one after another. Night began to fall, and the lanterns in the courtyard were lit one by one. From all directions, the lanterns lit up one by one. Jingwan felt that the feeling was a little strange, and, after all the lanterns were lit up, it was as she had expected, unusually beautiful. Looking at the sky again, although it was not completely dark yet, the full moon was already hanging in the sky, and the stars were scattered in the sky. There were no dark clouds in the sky, and one could imagine that tonight would be a very good night to admire the full moon. When the sky was completely dark, a large incense table was set up in the courtyard. On the table were fruits, snacks, and other offerings. Among them, mooncakes and watermelons were absolutely indispensable. The watermelons had to be cut into the shape of a lotus. The mooncakes on the incense burner table were bestowed by Emperor Luqingdi. Of course, there was also a specially made reunion mooncake, which was quite big. Under the moonlight, the statue of the moon god was placed in the direction of the moon. The red candles were lit high. With Madame Luo taking the lead, the women of the family took turns to worship. That's right, only the women participated. The men, from old to young, obediently watched from the side. As the saying went, men don't worship the moon, women don't worship the kitchen stove. The moon belonged to the moon. The moon god, Chang'e, was a woman, so only the women could worship the moon. If a man kowtowed humbly, it was a sign that he had bad intentions. Correspondingly, according to the folklore, the kitchen god was the incarnation of a mythical figure like Emperor Yin or Zhurong. In the dynasty, men and women should not touch each other. Therefore, it was against etiquette for women to worship him. What the hell was this? Jingwan could only laugh at this in her heart. After worshiping the moon, Madame Luo cut open the reunion mooncakes. The number of people in Luo Peishan's family, including the eldest grandson of the first branch, had to be cut. Speaking of which, Luo Peishan's family was all in the capital. If it was in the past, with Madame Wang as the chief knife, she would also have to include those in Qian Prefecture. Since Jingwan and the others were in Qi, in Prefecture, they would have to include those in the capital. However, every time this happened, Luo Peishan would always mention something about his second brother, the Luo second master, who had been a great scholar for 20 years and had students all over the world. Cutting mooncakes was a technical job. Every piece had to be the same size. However, this did not seem to be a difficult task for Madame Luo. Although the speed was a bit slow, the final result was gratifying. Everyone present took a piece, and the rest were placed on the incense table. The family ate happily, but there were also those who felt sour in their hearts. For example, the concubines of each branch were allowed to come out and gather together today. However, whether it was worshipping or mooncakes, they did not have a share. Then, there was another person who felt awkward. That was the Goof family. It seemed reasonable that Madame Luo did not prepare a share for them. However, the treatment that they received was the same as the concubines of the Luo family, wasn't it? After finishing the small piece of mooncake, everyone sat down and began to eat dinner. Of course, this was not a simple evening. Games, moon appreciation, dinner, these three were one. Of course, the games were more artistic, such as riddles, couplets, and connecting dragons. There was no reward for correct answers. If they did not connect, they would have to drink as punishment. Osmanthus wine. On the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, looking up at the moon and smelling the scent of osmanthus, drinking a cup of osmanthus wine, celebrating the sweetness of the family, was no less than a great enjoyment. This year's osmanthus wine seems to be a bit different. Why does it feel better than the previous years? Luo Shangshu carefully recalled the taste. Father may not know, but this wine was sent by Jin Wang a few years ago. Luo Rongwen said, "It must be said that this Mid-Autumn Festival gift was something that all relatives and friends had to prepare. It was just that Jin Wang's generosity was a bit big. Just what he sent was probably equal to the sum of everyone else's. Because Wang Shi was in charge of the family, the gift list was directly sent to Wang Shi's hands. It just so happened that he saw it. It was very difficult to maintain his composure. With such a generous gift, how could he return the gift? Madame Luo did not care much and followed the rules. In this way, the Luo family had profited greatly. So it's like this." Luo Peishan nodded. "Sure enough, everything in Jin Wang's hands is good." Everyone else nodded in agreement. Wasn't that so? This marriage with Jin Wang was not entirely a bad thing. As before, in Jin Wang's heart, he really cared about their family's miss as much as he showed. That was the best. The children did not eat much before they left the table and began to play with the lanterns in the pond. Compared to the flower lanterns, the fruit lanterns were naturally more playable. In this way, almost an hour passed. The elders continued, and the younger generation prepared to go out to play. This would definitely not be possible on normal days, but today there was no curfew, so they could play all night. The little bean children impatiently watched their older brothers and sisters go out. Even if Madame Luo relaxed the conditions to go out this year, it was still stuck at the age of 10. The happiest were probably the Four Branches D twins. This year they entered the capital just in time. Standing outside the gate, they could see that in front of each household, there were already lanterns everywhere on the walls. Although they could not see further, the lanterns seemed to illuminate the night sky, no less than a glazed world. Playing with lanterns during the Mid-Autumn Festival did not have a large lantern festival like the Lantern Festival, but it also had its own uniqueness. Almost all the households were going out at this time, moving forward neither fast nor slow. https://11/11807/6653281. Chapter 208. Perhaps because he was caught off guard, Chun Jingmin seemed to be somewhat at a loss, but no matter how hard he tried, it was difficult for him to shift his gaze away from her. He originally thought that time would be able to completely erase the lovesickness that should not continue to exist, but after seeing the person, he suddenly discovered that, let alone erasing it, it was clearly deeply rooted, even forming a towering tree. This sudden eruption actually had a somewhat uncontrollable momentum. He foolishly stared, unconsciously approaching step by step, as if he wanted to get closer, his breath carrying the scent of her body. Jingwan naturally discovered that there was something wrong with him at the first moment and quietly retreated. Not to mention that she was now a prospective Wang Fei. Even if she was not engaged, she should also keep a distance from outside men. As for the outside man, Jin Wang, that was a master who did not play his cards according to common sense. His words and deeds were never controlled by others. Jingwan sometimes spurned herself in her heart, but she also had to admit that in the passive, intimate contact, she still gradually got used to Jin Wang's way. As long as it was not in public, she would go along with him. Therefore, she was also someone who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Of course, if it were not for the heavy status of being an engaged couple, Jingwan would probably fight to the death and would absolutely not let a certain living king of hell touch her. In the end, she was not truly born and raised here. The bottom line that should be guarded will be guarded. Sometimes, she was more open than the average girl. "Cousin," Jingwan smiled and crouched down to greet him. Chun Jingmin seemed to have been suddenly awakened. His whole body quivered, somewhat stiffly standing a few steps away from Jingwan. Looking at Jingwan, He restrained the impulse in his heart and somewhat reluctantly pulled the corner of his mouth. "Cousin May, how have you been recently?" "Many thanks, cousin. I'm very good." "But cousin, this time when you went out to run errands, you've been exposed to the wind and the sun. You become a lot darker, but you also look more robust." According to Jingwan's estimation, he probably also grew taller. At his age, many people were still rapidly growing, so it was not surprising. It was the time when a teenager was turning into a young man. Chun Jingmin only felt that his throat was extremely dry. Calculating the time, before he left the capital, it had already been a long time since he last saw her. In addition, in the past 2 months, she had actually grown taller, and her figure was even more graceful. It actually felt as if a lifetime had passed. However, when he thought of the joy of being engaged to her, it was as clear as if it had been yesterday. Cousin is getting more and more. Little sister Wan, sister-in-law. Jingwan looked in the direction of the voice, then quickly walked over and naturally held her arm. "Greetings, cousin-in-law." Chun Jungmin hurriedly saluted, and the gaze that fell on Jingwan's body also withdrew, showing the demeanor of a gentleman. Sun Ijia turned sideways slightly and accepted half of the greeting before returning the greeting. "Nice to meet you, uncle." Sun Ijia sized up Chun Jungmin without batting an eyelid. Just now, she suddenly saw that this person who came in third was like her fifth brother, deeply in love with little sister Wan. She was worried that he would say something inappropriate, so she somewhat impolitely interrupted him. "Uncle, you have had a hard journey. This time, are you here to greet grandmother? Grandfather is not at home right now." The current situation was really awkward for Chun Jingmin. "Of course I am here to greet Grandaunt." Sun Ijia nodded. "Today my husband did not go out. When he knows that you are back, he will be very happy. I also haven't seen my cousin for a long time. Today, I can't miss a few cups of wine. I hope cousin-in-law won't blame me when the time comes." After all, he had experienced some worldly affairs, so he quickly became calm and composed. As he spoke, there was a hint of joking. "What are you talking about? You are cousins, so it is a great blessing that you have such a deep relationship." After chatting for a while, Chun Jingmin left to greet Madame Luo. After Chun Jingmin left, Sun Ijia looked at Jingwan rather mockingly. She could not tell that little sister Wan had the potential to be a femme fatale. These two outstanding men had really fallen into her hands. Jingwan was a little uncomfortable under her gaze. "What are you looking at? What is there to see? Are you angry from embarrassment?" When she and Jinghua first got married, she was teased a lot by her. It would be a waste if she did not use such a good opportunity to take revenge. Of course, she also knew that Jingwan would not really be angry, so she was like this. However, in terms of shamelessness, she was definitely not Jingwan's opponent. In an instant, Jingwan smiled and put her hands on her waist. "I can't help it. I am a girl who is loved by others. Flowers bloom when they see me." Sun Ijia was defeated. "If you have the ability to say these words in front of..." She pouted in the direction of the main courtyard. "In front of people, I don't have the ability," Jingwan admitted shamelessly. Sun Ijia was extremely speechless. Forget it. She had never won when it came to arguing with her. However, this kind of joke did not go too far. A true love, no matter the result, should not be joked about. However, Sun Ijia probably did not know that someone would take revenge for her at night. What no longer belonged to him would no longer belong to him in the end. No matter who it was, he should let go of this feeling. If he could not let go, then he should bury it deeply. Chun Jungmin wiped his face, raised a faint smile, and entered the main courtyard. After that, Jingwan did not see him in the Luo residence. It was said that after arriving at the temporary imperial residence, he came to the Luo residence after a little reorganization. After that, he only spoke a few words with Luo Jinghua before someone hurriedly came to invite him, saying that the emperor wanted to see him. The Qin family had declined in these years, but the temporary residence was still there. Although part of it was sold due to regulations, it was not as big as it was in the beginning. As a descendant of the Chun family, it was still possible for Chun Jingmin to come here and live for a while. Even if his family did not have a residence, After being summoned by the emperor, he would not be without a residence. The periphery of the temporary imperial residence was actually built into a post house. It could be seen that all aspects were considered. Lu Qingdi summoned the main members of the westbound party, including his 2 sons for young talents and several ministers who accompanied them. For this task, the 9th Wang had the title of an imperial envoy, so naturally, he was the leader of everything. Although in the whole matter, he only had a pair of ears most of the time, but most of the time, this was enough. As Li Honyuan expected, after he took down the chief culprit of the riot, the original 2 imperial envoys became one. Although the 10th Wang was still with him, he did not have the right to speak. Naturally, he could not argue with his elder brother. As long as the 2 brothers did not make any mistakes, coupled with a reasonable deployment of personnel by Luo Shangshu, it was basically a sure thing to solve the problem properly this time. The 9th Wang was highly praised by Lu Qingdi. For a moment, he was in high spirits and was very proud. Although the 10th Wang was jealous, he did not show it on his face. Along the way, he had gotten used to the 9th royal brother's face. Because he had been told many times before he left, he had to endure it again and again. After enduring it for a long time, he did not seem to take it seriously. Moreover, he thought that he had learned something along the way. When Lu Qingdi praised others, he could also smile. At least, there was no dissatisfaction on his face. Although the memorial was sent back first, the specific situation still needed to be known from the mouths of the people. After Lu Qingdi praised his son, he carefully listened to the reports one by one. It was very tacit. No matter which faction they originally belonged to, at this time, they did not fight for credit. At this time, they only scrupulously followed their duty. At this time, they only knew that they were involved in the part. Lu Qingdi was satisfied. Stroking his beard, his eyes finally fell on the 10th Wang. 10th Wang, don't you have anything to say? The 10th Wang was a little embarrassed. He glanced at his backer, Prince Rue. I'm a good-for-nothing. I can't help with anything. At that time, the 3rd imperial brother also said that I should go with him to learn something. In the spirit of listening and watching, I saw and heard a lot. The 10th Wang said some things selectively. However, the words he said were very skillful, making people feel that he really learned a lot. Lu Qingdi was happy in his heart. He was not stingy with his praise for this son. To the officials, he needed something practical. However, his son was different. He probably liked his praise more. The 10th Wang was overjoyed. The joy between his eyebrows became more real. Prince Rue and the others laughed together, but their smiles didn't reach their eyes. This was originally a dog that relied on him to survive. Now that he had a family and did something wrong, he seemed to have thoughts that he shouldn't have. However, since he could let him live well for so many years, he naturally could let him know what would happen to him if he wasn't around. The matter of the reward had to wait until they returned to the capital. After all, the flood in the south had not been dealt with properly. Chen Jingmin did not see Luo Peishan and the Luo family. After leaving Lu Qingdi's place, Chen Jingmin said a few words to him. Dozens of feet away, Sun Yilin stood for a while. In the end, he did not go forward and turn to leave. Perhaps it was because he had always been tolerant of his elder brother. Compared to Chen Jingmin, although he was more outstanding than many people of his age and his family was not as good as the Ding general manor, it was undeniable that he was brought up by his family. His mind was much simpler. Even though he had experienced changes and was growing up rapidly, Sun Yilin was still more restrained and had a stable and mature temperament. When he arrived, he might have the same thoughts as Chen Jingmin. Moreover, Sun Yijia was in the Luo family. His excuse to visit was completely in line with the rules. He was destined not to go to the Luo family in a hurry. Before Lu Qingdi summoned Sun Yilin, he just freshened up. He saw a few brothers and cousins who had nothing to do. He found that their words and actions were a little strange. However, he could not tell the details. As for his grandmother and parents, he had not seen them yet. His grandmother was old, so he should go and kowtow to her. His father should be busy with business. As for his mother, under normal circumstances, she should have come out long ago, but he did not see her because she was sick. Thinking of his mother's attitude before he left, his head throbbed with pain. When he went back and saw her later, he did not know what kind of trouble she would cause. Sun Yilin had never been an unfilial person, but when facing his mother, he was probably more willing to face the hardships of the outside world. In the past 2 months, he might have suffered a lot physically. After all, before this mission, he was also a delicate young master. But to be able to do something for the country and the people, to be able to show his ambition bit by bit, his heart was the so-called relaxed. On the way back, he even had the idea of going south. However, as an official of the imperial court, he naturally could not casually interfere in other affairs without an imperial edict, so he could only give up on the idea. However, in the dead of night, he could not help but think of that figure. Sun Yilin first went to visit old Madame Sunday. Old Madame Sun was trimming the flowers at the moment. Her attitude was as usual. It was as if her grandson had never left. He only went out once during the day and came back to greet her at night. Old Madame Sun put down the scissors and looked at Sun Yilin carefully. You've lost weight and become darker. However, your spirit is not bad. A real man should go out more often. Sun Yilin smiled. Sure enough, his grandmother understood him best. Is my grandmother okay? She can eat and sleep. There's nothing bad about it. Your little sister is pregnant. Sun Yilin's face showed joy. My little sister is really lucky. I'll go and see her later. Old Madame Sun snorted coldly. Sun Yilin's eyebrows jumped and his face changed. Did something go wrong? She was almost tortured to death by your mother. Fortunately, she was saved. Otherwise, our family and the Luo family would have become enemies. Old Madame Sun briefly recounted what happened that day. Although it's not to the extent that we don't have any contact with each other, the relationship of marriage and kinship is dispensable. Sun Yilin's face was like a color palette. When he wasn't around, she went to torment his little sister. She didn't care about his little sister and tried her best to smear the Luo family. What's in it for her to do this? She's clearly not in good health, but she's still... Old Madame Sun sneered. Who knows what's in your mother's mind? I've already grounded her completely. Sun Yilin wouldn't say anything too outrageous. However, it's good that she's grounded. After leaving old Madame Sun's place, Sun Yilin hesitated for a moment before going to see his mother. He wanted to see her, and with old Madame Sun's permission, no one dared to stop him. Sun Yilin entered the courtyard and saw that it was still in good order. After entering the house, the furnishings that should have been there were not missing. Although there were fewer servants, her mother had not been neglected. Mother! Duchess Ding smashed the cup in her hand and suddenly turned her head to look at Sun Yilin. Yilin, you're back. It's good that you're back. Other than that, Duchess Ding didn't do anything drastic. Contrary to what he expected, his mother didn't go crazy. However, Sun Yilin still didn't know what to say to her. Duchess Ding just asked him how he was doing along the way. It seemed that the graceful and dignified Duchess Ding had returned. However, when Sun Yilin said that he was going to see Sun Yijia, her body stiffened and she didn't say a word. Even at this point, he still didn't even say a word of apology. I still have something to do. I'll come to see you later. Duchess Ding watched him leave and stretched out her hand as if she wanted to persuade him to stay, but she didn't say anything in the end. The journey was long, so he naturally saw a lot of local customs and customs along the way. He was in a hurry when he left, but he was relatively relaxed when he came back. Sun Yilin was the young master of the Duke's mansion, and he had never been short of money. He bought a lot of things, and many of them were for young women. Others made fun of him and wondered if he had taken a fancy to a little girl. He only said that they were for his sister, and he was indeed a Sun Yijia. However, he didn't know if he had foresight, but he also bought a lot of children's toys. He thought that there would be a day when his nephew would come, so he came earlier than expected. He ordered people to pick up the things and gave one to Sun Yijia and the other to the Luo family. When Sun Yijia saw Chun Jungmin, she knew that her fifth brother would definitely come. So when she heard the servant's report, she thought that it was just as expected. Since there was no fate, seeing him would only increase her yearning. In this case, it was better not to see him. Therefore, Sun Yijia went to see her fifth brother and asked Jingwan to practice the zither seriously so that she could play it for her child in the future. Otherwise, her aunt's zither skills were so bad. In the future, who would have a nerve to say that her Luo Jingwan had once shocked everyone with her skills? Jingwan also roughly understood Sun Yijia's meaning, so she continued to practice the zither with grievance. Since she had the intention to stop them, naturally, such a thing as a chance encounter would not happen again. Sun Yijia went to the main courtyard. Not long after, the brother and sister came out together and sat in the garden. The brother and sister pair chatted casually, which made them feel quite relaxed and happy. Sun Yilin saw that her complexion was rosy and she had gained some weight. Her belly was also gradually showing. She was truly living well in the Luo family. Sun Yilin didn't mention Jingwan, but Sun Yijia couldn't help but bring it up. Fifth brother, Wan Mimi, is very well now. Jin Wang is also very good to her. Don't think about it anymore. Find a good girl and live peacefully. The pain in Sun Yilin's eyes flashed and disappeared. Then he laughed. Take care of yourself. Worry about your brother-in-law and child. I know my own matters. With him like this, Sun Yijia felt that her fist had landed on cotton. She was powerless. Seeing that it was about time, Sun Yilin said his goodbyes and left. But when he left the garden, he suddenly looked back. There was no need to ask. Sun Yijia knew what he was looking at. Not being able to see Wan Mimi, he should be regretful. However, he didn't regret doing that. If he wanted to break it off, it should be done cleanly. There wasn't a list of the things that were given to Sun Yijia. After returning, Sun Yijia looked through them one by one. Instead, Jingwan sat at the side and watched her fiddle with them. Among these things, there were expensive ones. Naturally, there were also things that were novel but relatively cheap. Sun Yijia didn't dislike them at all. She was even more partial to those little things. Those were elder brother's kind intentions. Of course, Sun Yijia also saw that there was something fishy about these things. Others didn't know, but she was very clear. It was clearly something that was specially prepared for Wan Mimi. But right now, she wanted to take all of it and didn't want Wan Mimi to know. Fifth brother, don't blame a Mimi for not being honest. With the help of her sister-in-law, Jingwan almost didn't make her spend any effort to get rid of her first two fiancés. It was just that it wasn't easy to get rid of them. That was why he attacked her at night with a dark face. In the past, Li Hongyuan occasionally came at night. If Jingwan was asleep, even if he woke her up, he would do it gently. He wouldn't make any big movements because he was afraid that he would startle her. But tonight, it was different. When he entered the door, he was in a dark mood. He was full of hostility. He directly took off her clothes and pressed himself on her. Jingwan was immediately awakened. Before she could react, he kissed her lips tightly. Not only was he not gentle, but he was also fierce. Jingwan didn't know what was wrong with him. However, his indulgence of Jingwan wasn't in vain. At least now, Jingwan wouldn't be so polite in front of him. When she was kissed until she couldn't breathe, she directly scratched him. She wasn't polite at all and directly left bloody marks. Li Hongyuan wouldn't really hurt her. When he let go, his face was still dark. Before Jingwan could say anything, he questioned her in a fierce voice. Did you see your two ex-fiancés today? Jingwan was stunned. The fire that Li Hongyuan made disappeared. Lying under him, she looked at him as if she was looking at something strange. Why did his tone sound like he was catching her in the act? And it seemed like there was a hint of jealousy in his voice. Was this purely possessiveness, or was he really jealous? One is grandmother's grandnephew, and the other is sister-in-law's brother. It's normal for them to come and pay a visit. It has nothing to do with me. Seeing that she had seen something strange, Jingwan explained to him in a good tone. Many misunderstandings were caused by such unclear reasons. Moreover, women were originally a vulnerable group. If they were misunderstood by their fiancés, they would definitely suffer a big loss. Although this problem was not within Jingwan's consideration, Li Hongyuan's face didn't look much better. Without saying anything, he kissed Jingwan again. Jingwan didn't refuse him and obediently let him kiss her. However, as they kissed, Li Hongyuan began to go crazy again. He held Jingwan's chin. In fact, he just held it, forcing Jingwan to look at him. He wouldn't really hurt Jingwan. I'm close to you. Why don't you resist? Jingwan was extremely speechless. Your Highness, do you want me to resist? However, this sentence not only didn't appease him, but also ignited a powder keg. The two of them. Did you allow them to do this to you? His eyes really looked like he wanted to swallow Jingwan alive. Jingwan was also a little angry. Your Highness, you're twisting words and forcing logic. I have nothing to do with them. You have nothing to do with them now. Previously, don't forget, you were engaged to them. I'm your fiancé now. When they were your fiancés, was it the same? Li Hanyuan was purely overwhelmed by jealousy at this moment and spoke without thinking. Even Jingwan felt that she was going to die of anger. You're the only one in the world who doesn't abide by the rules. There are many men and women who only meet after marriage. If it weren't for you taking advantage of me first. Inexplicably, she felt a little wronged. It was all this bastard's good deed, but now he had the nerve to blame it on her. Did he despise her for not resisting? Fine. Jingwan's claws slashed at his body mercilessly. It didn't work, so she used her teeth to bite him. She was so angry that she didn't hold back at all. She bit his shoulder until it was dripping with blood. Jingwan's fierceness finally woke a certain someone up, but it still didn't make him shrink back. He held the back of her head and kissed her fiercely. His mouth was full of the taste of blood, but he didn't care at all. But Jingwan was not interested in cooperating now. She was really using all her strength to resist. How good it was to be docile and even cater to his Wanwan. After eating the bitter fruit, she also knew that she had smashed her own foot with a stone. He wanted to say something, but Jingwan didn't give him a chance. Li Hanyuan raised his eyebrows and cooperated with her. He didn't use all his strength to suppress her, but he only used a little more strength than her. Under his deliberate intention, instead of saying that the two were competing, it was better to say that rolling around was a kind of fun. Jingwan's physical strength was far inferior to his. By the time she realized the clues, she had already lost her strength. Her body was limp and her head turned away, not wanting to look at this guy. Your Highness, you should leave quickly. I'm a shameless person who has intimate relations with men before marriage. I don't want to dirty your precious body. Saying such words, it was obvious that he was really angry. Good Samaritan. I was wrong. Don't be angry. I know you're not that kind of person. I forced you. It's just that when I think of their engagement with you, my heart feels like something is stuck in it. That's why I said those words. Don't be angry. Li Hanyuan had been thinking about her for too long. He knew that it was rude to get close to her before marriage, but he didn't let her lose her virginity before marriage. That was the limit. People who didn't have the same experience as him wouldn't be able to understand his desire for her. At the beginning, he only forcefully invaded her. When she didn't know anything, if she refused to resist, she was afraid that it would anger him and implicate the Luo family. So she compromised. He took advantage of this point and step by step made her accustomed to it. He invaded her everything, not giving her a way out, not giving her room to maneuver. Jingwan was speechless. You're a dignified prince. Where's your shame? Aren't you the living king of hell, cool and domineering? Who are you trying to show this pitiful and wronged look to? I didn't say a word about your ex-fiancés. Wanwan minds. Li Hongyuan's eyes even lit up. Jingwan wanted to cover her eyes. This big dog, your Highness, wake up. Li Hanyuan really did look like a big dog. He drooped his head in disappointment and buried it in Jingwan's neck. As if he was mocking, he said, I knew Wanwan didn't mind at all. When I think of you getting engaged with others, getting married with others, and doing what we did with others, I want to kill someone. He wasn't just saying this out of anger. When he thought of those two who still couldn't forget Wanwan, and Wanwan's husband in his previous life, he wanted to chop them all up. Jingwan sighed inexplicably. Your Highness, whether it's you or someone else, I'll get married sooner or later. Sooner or later, I'll have a man. Li Hanyuan hugged her even tighter. I won't allow it. You can only be mine. Mine. https://11/1107/6653248. Mobile edition. Chapter 209. Then, please hold on to me tightly, so that I can be loyal to you one day, Jingwan said as she unconsciously reached out to stroke the hair on the back of Li Hongyuan's head. After saying this, she was actually a bit lost in thought. She didn't know why she said such a thing. In this world where men were superior to women, a married woman should regard her husband as the sky. It was natural for her to be loyal to her husband. It was intolerable for her to be disloyal. If people found out, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she would be condemned by thousands of people. She actually said such a thing, and the other party was a prince who stood at the peak of power and controlled life and death. Women, in their eyes, might not even be as good as a piece of clothing. Jingwan believed that although she didn't live carefully like walking on thin ice, she still paid attention to what she should pay attention to. Even if her words and actions were out of line, it was still within the scope of control. Moreover, the other party was trustworthy and guaranteed that it wouldn't be leaked. Did this also represent her trust in him? Trust, such a simple word. However, whether it was given to others or received from others, sometimes it was easy, sometimes it was very difficult. When it was easy, it might be in a flash, and when it was difficult, it might not be realized in a lifetime. Jingwan reached out to cover her eyes. Sure enough, she was no exception. She would also be hit by the sugar-coated bullets called indulgence, pampering, and warmth. Although it was impossible for her to completely trust him, she still had a bit of trust in him. Jingwan now faintly understood the madness and decisiveness shown when one was heartlessly abandoned and heartlessly betrayed. Since the monarch is heartless, I will give up. It was easy to say, but it was really easy to do. It probably only showed that one wasn't wholeheartedly devoted. Just like now, she was thinking, if in the future this man promised her the life she wanted and heartlessly destroyed it, she wouldn't be so magnanimous as to let go, but whether it was possible to kill him. Look, she was just a little touched by him now. She was no longer blindly restraining herself from being moved by him, but she could have such thoughts. What about those who were deeply in love? Or was she actually extreme and crazy in her bones? Naturally, he had to hold on to her tightly. Once she was in his hands, how could he give others a chance? After knowing her temperament and the ideal life she wanted, if this could make her favor another man, then he could just slit his own throat. Li Hongyuan looked up, held her hand that was covering her eyes, and moved it away. That flash of ruthlessness made him slightly startled. He lowered his head and gently bit her bloody lips. What are you thinking about? Jingwan probably knew that there was something wrong with the look in her eyes, but she didn't panic. She didn't try to explain or cover up what she had just said. Facing Li Hongyuan, she tilted her head and suddenly smiled like a flower. Murder! Oh! Li Hongyuan was not surprised, let alone frightened. He even asked with great interest, Who? You. Jingwan opened her mouth slightly, but her words were clear. Li Hongyuan frowned slightly, looking a little distressed. Wang, let's make a deal. Did this man think she was joking? Ha. When you really want my life, just tell me. How about it? He probably knew under what circumstances she would want his life. Now that he was thinking about it, it was a good sign. Can I still kill you if I tell you? Isn't this a matter of taking the enemy by surprise and catching them off guard? I am your husband and also a member of the imperial family. Killing a husband is a capital offense. Assassinating a member of the imperial family will implicate the entire Luo family. So, it's not worth it for you to do it yourself. Tell me, I will help you. I guarantee that the final result will satisfy you, and you won't be implicated at all. So, whatever you do, you have to leave it to someone who's good at it. Jingwan looked at him in disbelief. Does Wang Ye really know what I'm talking about? What are you talking about? My ears are fine, my ability to understand is fine, and my mouth is fine. Wang, it's fine if you want my life, but there's a condition. Li Hongyuan pointed at her heart. It must completely belong to me. Only your heart can exchange for my life. Do you understand? He didn't seem to be joking at all. Jingwan's breathing stagnated. She suddenly felt a little scared. She twisted her body, as if to avoid the atmosphere that was like a cage. Her eyes wandered, not daring to meet his eyes. She forced a smile. If a person doesn't have a heart, they also don't have a life. A life for a life, I'm still losing out. Li Hongyuan chuckled and pinched Jingwan's chin, making her look at him. Wan, if you want to pretend to be confused, I won't force you. But you must remember what I Li Hongyuan said today. Not to mention this life, even in the next life. As long as you remember it, it will be effective. A heart for a life. You fell in love with him, and he betrayed you. You can take his life, and it's a promise that's not just for one life. It was very heavy, but it also made people look forward to it. Of course, Jingwan wasn't afraid that she couldn't bear it. It's just that, when these words came out of Jin Qinhuang's mouth, it seemed very unreliable. However, his attitude didn't seem to be joking. Li Hongyuan wanted to strike while the iron was hot and let her understand more things. But in the end, he was afraid that if he pushed too hard, she would shrink back instead. He was even more distressed by her frowning and tangled appearance. In any case, things weren't completely without progress. In fact, this progress had already exceeded his expectations. Her heart wasn't as hard to shake as he expected. But even so, he didn't feel that the road in the future would become easy. He unceremoniously bid her again. You're not allowed to see those two people in the future, understand? All her thoughts turned to nothingness in an instant. But Jingwan couldn't get angry at this time. She was only left with helplessness. Everything's fine. If there's nothing, why would I see them? Don't randomly eat vinegar and go crazy. Flying vinegar and whatnot, she didn't understand, but she could roughly guess. Even if there's something, you can't see them. Don't think that I don't know that those two people have wolfish ambitions for you. If there's really something, they wouldn't come up openly. Today, Chen Jingmin didn't wait for Fu Huang to summon him. He just changed his clothes and came over. It's really an ordinary visit. Why is there a need to be so anxious? What's his intention? It's simply short of announcing it to the world. Sun Yilin looks like a gentleman, but he's also not a good thing. Seeing Li Hongyuan's flustered and exasperated appearance that wanted to kill someone, Jingwan felt very amused. The one who had the least face to say that someone else wasn't a good thing was probably you, Jin Qinhuang. And this image of yours, the subversion is really too serious. It seems a bit childish. Let those people who have been dealt with miserably by you see it. Would they have the thought of being dealt with by such a person? They simply don't have the face to live. Thinking of this, Jingwan couldn't hold back and burst out laughing. Li Hongyuan's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. The hostility in his eyes seemed to congeal into substance. He suddenly turned over and got out of bed. Pulling his clothes over, he started to put them on. It seemed like he was really angry. Jingwan reflected, was she a bit too excessive? She hurriedly sat up, not caring that her clothes and hair were in a mess. She reached out to pull him. What is Wang Ye doing? Li Hongyuan turned back to look at her, his eyes cold and murderous. Doing what? Killing them. Bin Wang really shouldn't have facilitated their marriage with Wan. He should have directly asked his old man to sanction the marriage. Whether he agreed or not, he had to agree. At worst, he would overthrow his throne and cause his brothers to fight for the throne. So what if he started an internal and external war? What did the suffering of the people have to do with him? It would also save him from the pain in his heart, liver, and lungs, wishing that he could grind those people's bones and scatter their ashes. Although it wasn't directed at her, Jingwan couldn't help but tremble. She hurriedly stood up to stop him. I was wrong just now. Don't treat people's lives as nothing. Ayuan, don't casually kill people. Li Hongyuan's expression became even colder. Are you pleading for them? You even used a term that you only use in bed. Jingwan wanted to curse his mother. How could he twist her meaning like this? However, if she didn't appease him now, Jingwan was really afraid that someone would come to their house to report the deaths tomorrow morning. I didn't mean that. I just thought that if you inexplicably took their lives, no matter how much your imperial father dotes on you, he would definitely blame you. You also offended a lot of your brothers. At this time, they would definitely make things difficult for you. It's hard to say why you killed them. You can't tell the truth. When the time comes, I would be at the center of the storm. Ayuan, you wouldn't have the heart to do that, right? It's just killing one or two people. Do you think I'll be caught? Bin Wang isn't trash to that extent. Bastard, can't you speak properly? Of course, there's nothing you can't do. On the other hand, they're still considered young talents. It's not bad to leave them to work like cattle or horses for Qi Yuan. There are millions of people in Qi Yuan, and there are plenty of young talents. It doesn't make much difference whether they're added or not. He was determined to kill, wasn't he? Is he still a normal person who wants to kill someone just because of a disagreement? He's definitely sick, the kind that's seriously sick. It's so tiring to meet such a person. Yuan, I have nothing to do with them now. Don't be so narrow-minded, okay? I'm narrow-minded. Li Hongyuan's voice suddenly rose a few octaves. He looked at Jingwan gloomily and sneered. Wan, since you've said so, then I'll just make this title a reality. He didn't even care about his clothes and turned to leave. Jingwan subconsciously reached out and hugged his waist. She just wanted to slap her own mouth, but at least she knew that this person was really narrow-minded. She had to be more careful in the future. She couldn't say anything. I was wrong. How can you be narrow-minded? If that was the case, you would have killed them long ago. Yuan is the most magnanimous. I'm not magnanimous at all. You're right. I'm really narrow-minded. Jingwan wanted to cry. Who could give her some advice? She really didn't know what to do with this man. It was fine if she didn't coax him, but the more she coaxed him, the more it was like adding fuel to the fire. What the hell was this? Jingwan looked up, and he lowered his head to look at her. You're not going to say anything? If you're not going to say anything, then let go. Jingwan gritted her teeth and threw caution to the wind. She let go, quickly wrapped her arms around his neck, tiptoed, and kissed him. A certain someone's eyes flashed, but he lowered his head slightly. It would be a waste to reject the benefits that came to him. But that was all. He didn't reach out his hand, didn't kiss back, and firmly told Jingwan his unshakable position. Jingwan rubbed her lips on his for a moment, and used the tip of her nose to rub his chin intimately. As the saying goes, if I don't kill Bo Run will die because of me. Is Yuan really willing to let me bear such a sin? She secretly glanced at him, and his expression seemed to loosen. She continued, Moreover, at this time, is it really okay for you to leave me to kill people? She gently rubbed against him. Yuan, I'm so tired of standing on tiptoe. So, she had to quickly grow taller. It was not good to have a big height difference. At the same time, Jingwan heard a crashing sound. It was the sound of her moral integrity breaking. Li Hongyuan narrowed his eyes and reached out to hold her waist, pulling her close to him. He lowered his head and pressed his forehead against hers. Wan's words are reasonable. As the saying goes, killing people is common, but the grace of a beauty is not common. How can we let down something that is not common because of something that is common? He carried Jingwan up and placed her on the bed. This way, you won't be tired. Then, he pressed his body against hers. With overwhelming enthusiasm, Li Hongyuan's mouth was no less merciful than when he first came in. It was probably because she pleaded for leniency just now that he was in a bad mood and wanted to make up for it. Jingwan wondered if she would really be eaten by him tonight. However, if it really came to that point, she might not refuse. Regardless of whether she would fall into his hands in the end, she probably wouldn't have any other man besides him. Jingwan was somewhat unable to endure his hands and mouth, but she suddenly heard him say, Let them go for tonight and tomorrow. Jingwan was slow to understand what he meant. Anger rose from her heart, and she kicked him. You still won't let them go? Actually, those two are your true love. Jin Xinwang's reputation of eating both men and women is like thunder to the ear. If you really can't bear to let them go, then hurry and find them to be lovey-dovey. This miss wants to sleep, so I won't accompany you. Li Hongyuan also knew that if he continued to speak, she would probably turn hostile. He snorted, Whether or not I eat both men and women, I will definitely let you experience it for yourself. And then, on this night, Jingwan indeed experienced it for herself. Gong Mama, who had been kicked out of the room by Li Hongyuan at the beginning, was guarding the door with all her heart. Looking at the dark night sky, she was infinitely melancholy. Wang Yu was clearly taking advantage of the situation to cause trouble, and this miss had foolishly delivered herself to the door. Now that she had been completely eaten, she didn't know how she would be tormented by him in the future. However, Gong Mama also knew that according to this living king of Hell's temperament, if she didn't stop him, he would most likely settle those two Gongzi tonight. This attitude of wanting to be real and wanting to be fake, according to this Mrs. Temperament, even if she knew what his purpose was, she would still appease him every time. This loss, she had to eat it, even if she didn't want to. Therefore, Jingwan still didn't know that she had stepped on the bitter road of sacrificing her body to protect the peace of the world. Once he was stubborn, she had to appease him. If she didn't appease him, or if she appeased him too slowly, he could do whatever he wanted to do. He would make the heavens angry and people resent him, but they couldn't do anything about him. They could only cry and complain in front of Jingwan. After so many times, Jingwan probably learned to be obedient. Once he showed signs, she would quickly think of a way to extinguish it. It couldn't be better if he didn't torment her to the bed. Even if she did, it was better than waiting for his anger to soar to the extreme. The next day, when it was time, Jingwan didn't get up. However, her maidservants and mamas tacitly didn't wake her up. She had practiced for so long at night, so she didn't need to do it in the morning. A certain someone still left around the same time. He looked refreshed and didn't look like he was tired for half the night. Gong Mama was clearly angry, but she still had to help him freshen up. Fortunately, Sunny Jia didn't come to find her, so Jingwan could sleep until the sun was high up in the sky. In order to prevent irrelevant people from knowing, they just wiped her body after they stopped, and it was a certain prince who personally served her. When Jingwan got up, he fetched water to take a bath. Because it was long past the time for Jingwan to take a bath, he had to find an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. The servants wouldn't talk about the master, but it was difficult to explain to others, especially Madame Luo. Thinking about it, it should be obvious that this routine was suddenly broken. Anyone would have to ask if something had happened. Jingwan's body was denser than any other time, especially on her chest, lower abdomen, lower waist, inner thighs, and other places. It was almost impossible to see the original color of her skin. The maidservants blushed, the wet nurse was helpless, and Gong Mama was even more angry. Even if he had never touched a woman, he didn't need to be so cruel. The girl was still young and delicate. Even if he was a beast, he should know how to take care of her. Time after time, Jingwan had become thick-skinned in this aspect. Even with this appearance, under the gaze of the maidservants, she could still act as usual. She leaned on the edge of the bathtub lazily and was a little listless. There was no problem with her body. After all, she exercised regularly and her body was very flexible. It was not that she did not exercise for a long time and would feel sore after a little vigorous exercise. It was just that she did not get enough sleep. Gong Mama was like that. Every time a certain king of hell came, her face would darken. But other than being angry and competing with herself, it probably didn't have any other effect. Jingwan turned around in the water, resting her chin on her folded hands. She smiled faintly and said, "Mama, don't be like this. It doesn't hurt. Miss, it's not Mama nagging you, but don't indulge Jin Xinwang. This kind of thing, too many times will harm the body. You are still young." She was full of resentment towards Li Hongyuan and also a little resentful towards Jingwan. Jingwan shrunk her neck imperceptibly. It wasn't just the other party who was greedy for pleasure. She also had a little bit, just a little bit. Probably in order to cover up her little guilty conscience, Jingwan changed the topic. Yesterday, Cousin Min came with young Master Sunday. He knew later. "Mama, do you think he sent someone to keep an eye on our Luo family's gate?" This time, it was Gong Mama's turn to have a little guilty conscience. However, she didn't send a message to him about yesterday's matter. Originally, there was nothing. She was just worried that he would overturn the vinegar jar. As a result, the whereabouts of anyone who had a special relationship with Miss would still attract his attention. She didn't get Gong Mama's answer. Jingwan also didn't insist on getting an answer. How could Mama know about his matter? When Jingwan came out of the water, she wiped the water droplets and applied some ointment that could remove the traces earlier. She put on her clothes, dried her hair, and dressed neatly. No traces could be seen. Even if she met someone with sharp eyes and saw a little clue on her eyebrows, if they didn't think in this direction, it wouldn't arouse suspicion. Jingwan first went to old Madame Luo's place. Old Madame Luo's gaze swept over her body. When Jingwan was a little uncomfortable, she retracted her gaze as if nothing had happened and chatted as usual. Jingwan spent time here and didn't have the intention to drive her away. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but Jingwan always felt that grandmother seemed to know about her and Jin Qinhuang's matter. It was only because of her love and tolerance for her that she never exposed it. She also gave her absolute trust, believing that she wouldn't do anything that was disadvantageous to herself or the Luo family. Perhaps there was also trust in Jin Qinhuang. Other things aside, one point was very obvious. Jin Qinhuang had such a bad reputation, yet grandmother never showed dissatisfaction with this marriage. She didn't show any concern for her future. According to grandmother's care for her, even if it was hidden in her heart, she wouldn't be unable to see it. So, there really was something that she didn't know. Jingwan suddenly hugged old Madame Luo's arm and rubbed against it like a spoiled child. "What's the matter?" Old Madame Luo looked at her, puzzled. Jingwan smiled. "Nothing, I just want to get closer to grandmother." Old Madame Luo smiled and patted her hand and didn't ask any more questions. Lunch break, and then they went to Sunny Jia's place. Third brother, Luo Jingbua, went out again. Among the 5 people, he was occasionally busier than Luo Shangshu. When Hui, this ban has been lifted? The meaning of the higher-ups seems to be that everyone has been restrained for a long time. The aftermath of the flood is basically stable. In addition, it won't be long before we return to the capital, so we can take advantage of this time to have fun. His Majesty said that it seems that it has been deserted for a long time. The imperial concubines in the temporary imperial residence have begun to gorgeously dress up and stroll around the garden again. Who said this? You, a person with 2 bodies who doesn't go out, no, but I don't know. It just happened this morning. Your third brother was dragged out by this year's third scholar because he didn't send an invitation. Yesterday, the 3 grand scholars and your 5th brother, the number 1 young master in the capital, arrived. This one Hui is finally starting to look a little bit better, right? Jingwan wasn't belittling anyone. It was just that there were more young masters from aristocratic families who came to the temporary imperial residence. Most of these people were idlers. Even if they were pretending to be cultured, there weren't many who could really do anything. Since there's no invitation, there shouldn't be any restrictions on this impromptu one Hui. Sister-in-law, why don't we go take a look together? https://11/11807/6653254. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.